Strategies toward achieving financial health in the arts. We've got 3 panelists, and the bio notes for panelists as well as the moderator we put in the chat room, so I'm not going to go over those. Nabil Rahim, Billie Jane Bolton Rojo, and Paulina O'Keefe Anthony. 3 stellar people who I'm sure will be able to give us a lot of advice on this and insights. And the session is being moderated by the chair of the SAPAMO board, Melrose Cornwell. Melrose, I will do a bit of an introduction for him, as he's our board chair, and we're really happy he's in our first year with us, and glad to see him in this role. Melrose is a Toronto-based financial services professional with nearly a decade of experience in the financial sector. He's ended his studies in aviation in 2011 and discovered his passion for helping the children in his community, particularly in regards to financial literacy. He volunteers as chairperson of the employee resource group of his company, and that group aims to promote diversity and inclusiveness of the Black and Hispanic groups in the country. His goal is to arm the group members with financial literacy education by connecting them to both finance-based events and culturally relevant courses, classes, and networking. It's been a joy working with Melrose on our board. He's insightful, he's got a lot of energy, and with that comes a lot of ideas and generosity. Melrose, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. So I'm actually very excited to have the panelists that we have, a diverse group of incredible people, and really starting off the conversation as well too. Our reader did a fantastic job in beginning the conversation, talking about the scarcity and the fear around scarcity and how we talk about money and how we talk about finances and beginning that. So what we'd like for you to get out of the session today is maybe some understanding of how we got to where we are, a little bit of ideas on how we can continue to go forward, where you can go from here, especially, and then later on in the afternoon, after our panel, we'll actually talk about a couple of key terms in finance. We'll talk about some risks, and we'll talk about where you can actually go to get financial information if you need to, and how you could invest your money if that's something that you're interested in doing. Like I said, we had an incredible panel with us. So actually, the first person that I'm going to turn to on the panel, we'll go ladies first. Sorry, Nabil. But actually, I'd like to hear from Billie Jane Rojo. And just on the heels of the message that our reader said, Billie Jane, how do you think, first of all, how have you spoken, or in your family growing up, how did you guys talk about money, and how do you feel like that shaped your financial present and financial future, like the conversations of money and family?
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here, first of all. So thank you for the privilege of joining everyone here. And yeah, that is a good question about how the family conversation started. And I have to say that, within my home, my parents, they didn't talk a lot about it. Mind you, my dad did have a few key tips. And one key thing that he mentioned all the time was to put money aside for yourself first. So whenever he would give us some money, he would always ask for us to put some aside. And he continues that even with my kids. When he comes and he gives them money, he's like, how much do you want to give back to me? So that they can be putting a little bit of aside. And before you know it, there is quite a bit of funds available. Like my youngest, who actually is a burgeoning artist, and he was so excited to get an iPad, okay, because he wanted to try doing digital art. And it was really from saving up the monies that his grandpa had given him, the little bit week over week or every 2 weeks when he would come, that he managed to save this considerable amount towards his iPad. So that was one of the huge messages that we got growing up, is no matter how much you get, always put aside a little bit for yourself, and you pay yourself first. The other thing was really, he was great in just sort of living it out. Some of the things that I learned was because of the things that he did for me, things like investing in our future as kids. He did that, and he didn't talk that much about it, but knowing that he did it was a lesson for me. So then when I had kids, I thought about that, and there's also, the other thing about protecting. He did that for me when I was a teenager. So then when I grew up, although I didn't understand anything about it, it was something that I did. So that was, a little bit about my own family history around money, because I know it's hard, especially, within the space, as an artist where you may have fluctuating income, to always put aside money for yourself first is something that I think is a message that really helps everyone.
So great. Thank you for that. Next, actually, Paulina, let's hear from you in terms of how the conversation started with you. I definitely identify with putting some down for myself first. So I get that. Thank you, Billie Jane, for that. Paulina, how about you? What was the conversations like, or what were the conversations like when you were growing up around money? And how do you think that shaped your future?
So my conversations around money were not as great. Actually, early on, we didn't talk about money to the fact. So my parents immigrated here from 2 different parts of the world. And so money was very hush hush, to the point where I actually never thought we were poor. I thought we were always rich. That's how little I knew about finances or what was going on. And then later, as I spoke to my mom, I was like, dang, right? But yeah, so there wasn't really, I would say, conversations about money. And then later on, my dad is so funny. He's such a spender, actually. And so since I was closer to him about talking about money, I became a spender, and that debt was normal, and that we're all going to have debt forever. And, you know, you just live your life, and when you die, your debt will go away and stuff like that. And that, so there's no differentiation between good debt or bad debt. So I didn't know a lot of concepts. And then I remember getting quite a bit of money for scholarships after high school, and more than I needed for school. And my mom's like, let me take that and put it away in an RSP for you. I'm like, RSP? I don't even know what that is. All I remember is like, I don't know if anybody has this experience, but like when you're a kid at birthdays and your parents would be like, I'll just hold your birthday money that you get, and then you never see it again. Yeah. So that just kind of played out. And I'm like, oh no, you're not taking these thousands of dollars to put in this thing that I don't know, whatever this is, and I might not see it again. And so, but then I ended up spending it. So again, not enough conversation about the tools and the way in which they work. So not that they didn't know about it. My parents were really big into like real estate, and that's how they kind of kept buying houses and moving up in houses, but never sitting down to kind of really explain like what that was, what wealth building was, like how do you make money off this thing. And so I unfortunately had to learn a lot later in life, which is fine, and did myself a lot of research. But what was great about that experience was that it taught me like, this is not what I want for my children. And now my kids are totally the opposite. They're 7 and 9. They have their own sole proprietorship. They have their own stocks. They have their own life insurance. They have everything off the thing is like the complete opposite. And so that's just what I learned, that, you know, no matter what age you learn at, you have an opportunity to not only like build up for yourself, but also build up, you know, for your kids or your grandkids, whoever it is. You have the opportunity to pass on what you didn't know when you didn't know it, but now you know it now, and it's your responsibility to pass it on. So it's kind of where I'm coming in.
Yeah, amazing. Kind of like, push it forward and each one teach one. And I really identify with that as well too. With my daughter having her own, mutual funds and stuff, that learning the game for herself. But one thing that, I definitely identified as well too, is the conversations about money in my household as well were non-existent. And or if they were existent, it would be here. Then let me know if you all have heard this before. If it's not one thing, it's another. Or money doesn't grow on trees. So my relationship with how to get funds was difficult at best, because it was always, to me, it was always difficult to come by. And you always had to struggle, or there was always some kind of struggle associated with money. And speaking of which, Nabil, you're in finance. You've been in there for a better part of a decade and a half. What about your conversations? How did you get into the industry? Do you think that having the conversations of money, if you did have them at home, did that shape the direction of your career and what you think about it now?
So it's funny, similar to Paulina and Billie Jane, the conversation with family was very hush-hush about money. It was always about save, save, save. And they never talked about finances. Similar to Paulina, I didn't know if we had money or we didn't have money. We never went for anything when we always wanted to say, oh, can we get those Nike shoes? My mom would be like, oh, that's too much. Let's go with the Brooks. And we were fine with it. It's nothing a problem. But again, it was always saving, saving, savings. We're Muslims, so we celebrate Eid twice a year. So whenever we got our Eid money, it was, oh, do you want me to put this in a Canadian savings bonds for you? Well, not really. Well, we're going to do it anyways. So it was very save, save, save. You never know what's going to happen. And that I think that comes from my parents being immigrants to Canada from India, where they didn't have a financial foot in Canada. They weren't even sure if they were going to make it in Canada. So when they say that, save, 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 they didn't have any support when we were growing up. They were their own support. So me taking that forward, even though I have me and my sister are first generation Canadians, at the same time, we have support from our parents. We want to stand on our own feet. We want to be able to be successful on our own and be able to do that on our own without any help. So, that's what I've really taken forward from my family since we were kids.
Amazing. So I see there's a lot of synergy across, different groups, different age ranges, but, particularly when it came to immigrant families as well, too. The difference is that, we just don't have all the information right off the bat. Paulina threw out this really great word. Nabila, I want you to start with this one. Paulina threw out this really great word, debt. What are your thoughts on debt? I mean, whenever people think about, even having money to put away or squirrel away, the first thing they think about is, but I got those credit cards, or I owe that person this or whatever. And how do I manage that? I don't have enough to put away. Is debt manageable? Like, should you have debt and invest? Like, what do you think?
So I think having debt is good and bad. So for example, a mortgage is the type of good debt you need to have. High credit cards, lines of credits, those are the bad debts that you have. To be honest with you, you need to have debt to build your credit in this country. And without credit, you can't do anything. You're handcuffed. So having debt, having a credit card when you're young, even if it's just for buying gas on your way home and then paying that off immediately, you're building up credit towards your future to when you're ready to buy a home, buy a car, or want to do anything. Also, no matter how much debt you have, you should always be paying yourself first, similar to what Billie Jane's father used to tell her, that, you have to make sure that you're paying yourself first, because you are the foremost person who's making the money, who's earning the money. So why shouldn't you at least save the money for yourself or enjoy it the way you see fit?
Absolutely. And Billie Jane, because you worked with families and helping them prepare for, next steps, particularly around education, does that conversation ever come up about, let's say you're talking to a family about RESPs and stuff like that. Does that conversation ever come up?
Around debt?
Yeah,
absolutely. And the context that I actually look at so much more with parents, especially as they're thinking about getting started and saving for their own children, was that how they had started their lives very heavily indebted. And that started first with education. They wanted to pursue some type of education and there was no money for them, or very little, and so what did they need to do? Of course, they had to go and get OSAP. And thank goodness we have the privilege to be able to access funds so we can pursue our dreams and hone our gifts. But that's kids starting out before life's even begun already with debt. And I don't know, I remember when I first I went to university. I remember when I stepped on campus, there were people all over chasing me with credit cards. So on top of that, having to be, contend with that. And, if you're not accustomed to it, then before you know it, you don't really realize that this credit card's not really your money. And you've racked up money on that as well, on top of some student loan debt. So that is something that I talk a lot about with my parents in terms of how, their own experience and that their desire to not have their children step out in that kind of an experience as well. So that's why they do start, when you start thinking like next generation, how can I start doing a little something? It doesn't even have to be, paying all of a child's education, but start a little something, because while we are so concerned with the today, we do need to also be thinking about tomorrow and the next generation and our obligation to the success of our next generation. But when it comes to things like education, There's so many other funding sources. So that's a huge thing that I talk about with my parents. Start at an amount that you can that's manageable. You don't have to fully max it out. Do what's reasonable within your resources, within your cash flow. And then when your kids get older and they know that there's some money, it changes their whole mindset about pursuing their dreams, and then expose them to other opportunities to supplement so that they're not starting their lives maybe in the situation that you started. Just as Paulina, her situation today is much different for her children is much different from what she experienced growing up. So this is one way that we can, at least when we're thinking next generation, we can help our kids not step through the same journeys that we may have.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. And I love how you both are really speaking to, the first thing that I really hear is pay yourself first, but I also hear a little goes a long way. And so many times people are so fearful, and from what I've seen in conversations that I've had with, with clients and people in the finance industry as well too, is that there's a misperception or misconception that you need to have $5,000 in order to invest, because if you don't have that kind of money, then what's the point, right? And that's, that's simply not the case. You can start as low as $25 a month. And while I get that, you're not going to see the gains that you think you're going to see, you're not going to, become a millionaire in 5 months or anything like that. A little goes a long way, and squirreling it away, over time, you'll actually start to see that compound interest build up. Speaking of that, actually, speaking of investing in that direction, I actually wanted to go to another topic here. I know, Paulina, I didn't give you a moment to chime in on that one, but I want to just move over to another topic, because I was really interested in what you were talking about when you're talking about your kids and having stocks and insurance products and stuff that is really active in that sense with your children. What does investing mean to you in that sense? Like, how do you pass that knowledge on to your kids, and what do you think that investing will mean to them?
Oh, easy. What investing means to me? Freedom, straight up. And I learned about investing last year when the stock market crashed. Like I learned about it before, but like really got into it last year.
Yeah.
Woo, that was a game changer. And whatever I learned, my kids learned. Like as I was learning things, they learned things. As I was opening up brokerage accounts, I opened up practice accounts for them. As I was taking courses, they were learning, red candle means down, green candle means up. Okay, you need the basics. Why? Because my daughter, so I love to tell this story. My daughter, like a year before, let's just say at the kind of like the beginning of 2020, she's very mature for her age, for being 9, and she was 8 then. And she was like, always like, oh, Mom, I want to get a part-time job at McDonald's or something. Like, oh, McDonald's, my God. Not that there's anything really wrong, because that's where I started, but I'm like, you're elevated now. You don't need that. You don't need that, because she thinks like this is like hard work. That's what she's seen me do. Hard work. The harder you work, the more money you put in. And that's the way you make money. That's the only way. So then we started learning trading and stuff like that. And if you ask my daughter what she wants to be at the beginning of this year, she will tell you she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, a rich stay-at-home mom that does stocks. That's it. And that, to me, that's huge, because that just changes her mindset about where money comes from. It doesn't have to come from your labor in that way. There are other ways to get money. And so that's important for me. And that's the way I frame it to my kids about investing. You can be whatever you want. You can be a police officer, a firefighter, a teacher, whatever, but you also have this other thing that's growing your money elsewhere. That when you want to take a break, that you're like, want to switch it up. I want to do something different in my life. That you're not like, oh man, but I got to like just work a little 5 more years till I get that. Like you don't have that barrier to do that. You can just go switch it up. You want to buy a house. You're not like Mummy, who is like scraping everything with her, with my husband to like we just bought a house this year, like to get there. Like you can do that earlier on, which gives you more time to compound, your equity in your house and that kind of stuff. So we learn about these things. So essentially investing for my kids means freedom to do whatever you want. And my kids are very artistic. Like my daughter is a writer and a little writer and performer, budding artist. And so I'm telling her, like, you are making money to be able to pursue your art, or you're making money to invest in your little business. Like those are things that excite her, to say that you don't have to, I won't have to teach her to depend like many of us artists do, on the granting system, because we have other ways to make money to fund our own projects. Doesn't require me to, you know, pimp my trauma or write 1,000 essay away, you should give me the money, right? I can just get the money myself, or I can pool in with other artists, we can invest together and create our own grant. So that has opened the door. And so for me, investing is freedom. And that's long-term, but also short-term supports. Like if I want to pay bills, learning how to trade means that I'm increasing my monthly income, you know, whatever little increments I can. And that helps a lot. It takes the pressure off a lot. It means I do less gigs, I work less, and then my kids see me more. So those are the important things that they're witnessing as we're learning this investing journey together.
I really love that. And I love particularly how you use it as a platform, as a tool to not only just invest in the arts, but invest in the human being behind the art as well too, giving yourself a little bit of space. Because, you know, work, particularly during the pandemic, I don't think I have to tell you artists, is precarious. I mean, you can go from one location, one job to another, and not necessarily know when the next time you're going to eat. And so being able to remove that stressor right there, one of the stressors that life throws at us, I can see that that's huge. And to be able to give your children that view of that strength is also huge as well too. And folks, for all of y'all out there that don't have kids, don't worry. There's still, all this information is still good for you too. Not trying to shame you into having children. All these lessons are not about having kids or getting the lessons from your kids or anything like that. But I also want to ask you, Nabil, as well too. Particularly, you know, around the conversation of like what investing means to you, but I mean, we already had a conversation start as well, and as in like how a community mindset would work. So can you tell me a little bit, not only like what investing means to you, but what do you think it would mean to a community, a group of people?
So, you know, investing to me means forward thinking. You know, you're always making sure that you have something on your plate when the time comes that you don't have anything. And in regards to community, you know, let me take it back a few hundred years. You know, a lot of people talk about insurance. Well, how was insurance formed? They weren't built with corporations. It was a town. It was a rural family or group of families who said, you know what, farmers, let me start off with $100 a day or $100 a month. And if your crops don't come in, we'll cover your crops to make sure that you have insurance for your family, to make sure you can put food on their plate and such. So when you're talking about investing, you're forward thinking to a future that might not be there. You know, to make sure that you have money put aside, either if it's $100, $500, $1,000, you have to start somewhere, because if you don't, it could be a huge problem for you.
Awesome. And Billie Jane, what do you think about that as well too? Like, what do you think investing would mean to, you know, not only like a person, what it would mean to a community? Yeah, like what kind of impact would it have on a community? As Nabil said, you know, insurance even started from just a collective. You know, credit union started from collectives. What do you see group investing doing to communities?
Yeah, I think that was so powerful, Nabil, for sharing that, because I was actually even thinking from the ancient Egyptians. They started that, you know, in terms of let's pool our resources. So if any one of us is not here, we can still send them off with a decent burial, right? Or, you know, with according to their faith. So that's really powerful, the opportunity for community to come together and pool resources. And so as Nabil had mentioned, you know, being forward thinking, it is for a time that we're not thinking, we don't know about, but we must know that life is seasonal, and there will always be a season of, you know, a dry season kind of thing. So we need to prepare for that. And with thinking in the future and investing, if we as a community, I mean, as a group of people can pool resources, they can actually go much further in terms of types of assets that could be acquired, in terms of, you know, the kind of returns that you can get, that it's just so much more powerful as a group rather than just one. But investing is really, you know, as both Nabil and Paulina talked about, in terms of being more long-term, it is an opportunity to take your money and have it work for you. And it can be used also for common purpose, common, you know, I mean, in the case that Nabil was talking about was farmer, I mentioned, you know, Egyptians in terms of funeral, but even pooling resources, investing it so that you can even self-fund people's art projects within the community. It is such a huge opportunity, you know, so to leverage the expertise of a Paulina, you know, who's within the space, who can teach and educate about how to invest and how to take advantage of the stock market, and also think about investments that you care about, like products, go around what's going on in the world today, you know, what can I invest in? And as a community, pool resources and have much more purchasing power. And then you can even use that to self-fund and not having to write those $1,000 essay for grants, right? That would be beautiful as a community to be able to do that. So I think, you know, I think community investing can be a really powerful way to advance the entire community.
Oh, that's incredible. And you know, on the heels of that, don't go anywhere actually, Billie J, because I'm actually going to pose this question to you first. You know, on the heels of everything that's happened, you know, there's a whole mindset now becoming reemergent around, you know, group investing and collective investing and stuff like that. And one thing that I actually want to talk about, which you might have heard last year in our community, was, you know, buying black, right? That was definitely a huge thing, particularly last year, buying black. But yet I also find that people don't think about the alternate side of things. So what I want to ask you, and I want everyone in their seats to really take a moment and think about it, but what do you think is more important, or maybe more important to you in the moment? Buying what, like, you know, whatever your community could be black, could be artists, could be people of color, indigenous, whatever that is, buying X or funding X, putting your money and resources into that community.
Wow, that is such a good conversation, such a good topic. And, you know, I'd actually been watching a little bit about that and the importance of investing into Black projects, Black business. You know, that is what helps to equip business to be successful, right? But yes, I think that we need to be doing both, right? Because, you know, if I can go and direct my dollars to, you know, the local, you know, Black business, then I know that my dollars is going towards helping to feed a family within my own community. So it's, to me, I actually do. I mean, listen, like hair products, I'm like, I don't care. I will travel to find the Black hair shop. My daughter's like, can we just go here and get it? I'm like, no, I will be inconvenienced a bit to know that my dollars are being recirculated. But if you see a project that is, you know, run by a Black person, to invest into that, to, you know, to provide them with the capital that they need to be able to be successful is huge. And then we too, you know, will be more willing to take an interest in, you know, in the success of our own, right? We were willing to take more of a chance, right? So yeah, funding Black business, you know, is huge. And even just, I've been, you know, was listening to, what's the name, Roland, I can't remember his name in the States, and he talked a lot about that, you know, funding Black media. Don't just talk about, you know, throwing dollars at this or that cause or that charity. Well, no, if you are, you know, doing you have a business and you are using services, why not direct some of those dollars and you know, give that business to another Black or, you know, BIPOC, you know, business or art project or whatever. Let's start to empower our people to be self-sufficient through business and entrepreneurship.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Yes, thank you so much for that. Nabil, I want to throw that same question out to you as well too. What do you see as more important? Do you think the buying aspect or the funding aspect is more important, or is it the combination of the two?
You know, I would have to go with funding if I had to choose either or, because it's kind of like the old age saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for the day, teach him how to fish, you feed him for a life. If we're funding these projects or funding in the community, well, we're starting to build something. And what happens when you start building something? You start to capitalize on the community. You start able to pull profits from the left and the right. And now you can reinvest those profits back into the community, and you can start giving out more and more. Now you're building not just for 5 years, 10 years of business, you're building something that will last the test of time and could possibly be there when you're not there. If you look at, you know, some of these banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, CIBC, the people that fund that or founded that, they're not here now. but their system is still in place. If we can start doing that for any community, that's going to be huge, and that pays the community forward forever. The entity is always going to be there.
Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely love that. Paulina, what do you think? Where do you land on that side of the equation?
I have to agree with Nabil. I think investment over buying. And I'll say that because when we talk about buying Black, that, or in my community in particular, that is limited, right? That rallying cry is Black people trying to buy Black, and that's limited. And then even in there, you see, you'll see the occasional talks about, oh, it's inconvenient, like Billie Jean was saying, it might be inconvenient, or, the service isn't great. But a lot of that is actually about in being able to improve competitiveness. And you can only do that through investing. If you're investing in educating those businesses, if you're, we're investing in businesses to give them more funds, to train staff, to be able to move to online shipments, to expand stores. So there's not just one store in Ajax and you're all the way in Etobicoke, you got an East and West store, that all of that builds up that business. And when we invest in those businesses and they become, more resourced, it's not just about us buying Black, but then other folks. It becomes convenient for other communities. And that's actually where you start to see more money and revenue come in. Because if you think about all the large businesses, the McDonald's, the Walmart, all of that, what's that based on? Convenience. What is convenient? What is there for us? But the only way that they have been able to build that is off folks investing in them, going public on the stock market, which brings you so much money. And then they're able to invest in and build their systems really quickly to kind of maneuver with whatever the shifting economy or society is. And so we cannot catch up as fast no matter how Black we buy, how much Black we buy. There's just not even enough of us. For us to actually get the funds to compete, we have to invest in these businesses to make them stronger, better, more competitive. And so then it will not just be us buying Black for that. For example, it'll be other communities that are like, oh, well, yeah, I could go to Walmart, but shoot, I'm going to go over here and it's like the same price. And it's, it's different when you're going to a Black hair salon, for example. And now you got to think about, I want to support Black, but this is like $3 more than what I could get it at Walmart. Right. Yeah. And so if we eliminate that kind of thinking right there, you can see more folks will come in, and it's not as something you have to think about your own economy. So investing, to me, and funding these businesses and supporting them, funding these artists, if we're talking about wanting to see more Black art, well, guess what? Black artists are at the whims of white funders, white donors, white institutions. So we're never going to get the break that we want or that the community wants. So we have to invest our own spaces. We have to invest in our own artists, in our own gallery exhibits, and fund our artists in our own way. And that is the only time you're going to actually see Black art really emerge at the same institutional level as the National Ballet, as the AGO, because folks are investing in those things. And so that we also have to do that instead of trying to pick up scraps in the arts community of whatever we can get, or whenever we're the hot button topic of the year.
Got it. And don't go anywhere, because I just thought of something, and it's totally wasn't on the agenda here, but I hear this often enough, and I want to know what your guys' take on it is, because no matter how you invest in any community that you invest in, sometimes there's going to be some opposition. So what do you say to somebody who says, yeah, but buying particularly this, or buying or investing in particularly that one arts group or whatever that is? I feel like that's, I feel like that's kind of biased. Don't you think? Like, you don't think that there's like a little bias there? Like and I'll throw out this term, devil's advocate. What about reverse racism? What about, isn't that like, if you're buying Black, isn't that like reverse racism? Because you're not actively buying everything else?
Are you asking?
I'll ask you. Yeah. I'm keeping it with you. Yes.
I don't believe in reverse racism, because racism assumes that you have some like a power and privilege that no matter how much we want to invest in Black communities, white, all of our society is built, I think, very heavily on white supremacy and colonialization. And so for us to get to a point where we kind of overpower that, that's a long way coming, let me tell you. I would say no, it's that for those who are like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that because it's very specific. But I can point to a million examples of specific communities. And I just say this as the Black community, because there are so many examples of specific communities who already implement these types of economic investment systems, and nobody is coming for them, not at all, right? But as soon as like, Black folks want to do that. It's like it's a whole thing. We're talking about reverse racism when that's exactly how the Jewish community has come up. That's that's exactly how many communities have come up, and it's not racist. It's supporting the folks who look like you and using an economic strategy. That's all that it is, right? I'd love to be able to like then go out and do whatever, but I have to actually look out for folks who look like me and in my community because nobody else is, right? And so that is a strategy that's been used in many communities. I don't understand why it's often attacked in the Black community when we try to do it. And we should do it. We should be doing that. And it doesn't have to be forever, but we should start there and then move our dollar elsewhere if we needed to. Then we have, I would say, leverage and power to start then negotiating and strategizing with other POC groups or other communities, because then we become leveled. We're not on a level where we can even actually, I think, approach another community, because there's so many communities that are economically have more advantage than us because they've already implemented these structures and systems through immigration, through so many things already. And so we are actually at a place where we're at the mercy of a lot of those other communities have already done it. And so I think it's our time to step into that, so that instead of being at the mercy of another community who's already leveraged that stuff over time, that we can actually come in as an equal, as a peer, and say, now can we co-strategize other POC community or Indigenous community, or even like we're coming toe-to-toe with you, white community, but we have to move ourselves out of like the mercy of other communities who have already, and I will read this again, implemented these strategies for long times and still are doing so.
I really love that. And particularly when you talk about, getting ourselves to a healthy standpoint where you can also build synergy, not only just competing, but you can build synergy with other groups, Indigenous groups, other arts communities and councils and stuff like that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I want to go back to a conversation that we were having. And I know I didn't give you guys much of a chance, Billie Jane and Nabil, to talk about that one. But I'm really interested in what your views are on this one. I'll actually start with you, Nabil, because Billie Jane said something that was really great. And I can't remember exactly what it is, but it made me think of this. So I'm going to attribute that to you, Billie Jane. And it's really around, what should you think about? Like, how do you even begin investing? Like, what do you even think about when you want to go invest? Like, what's your focus in general? If, you're talking about a beginner who knows nothing about finance, nothing about stocks, bonds, all that stuff is just noise. What do you think about?
So first of all, I always say to clients who are saying, well, you know what, I don't have money to invest. Well, name a goal and put money aside for that. Because once you start naming a goal, then you're achieving a goal. And then all of a sudden you feel what you did was right. Because say, for example, I started investing when I was a child. Saving my Eid money or my birthday money and stuff so that I could buy hockey cards or, buy, my basketball shoes or something like that. So honestly, it doesn't matter if you start with $100, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. If your intention is to do something, is to save money for a goal, and you name that goal, that's all you have to start off with. Another aspect of that is kind of educating yourself. The internet is huge. It's so big. You can go into the library and you won't even be able to pick up what's on the internet, not even 1% of it. So educate yourself. If that is something that you want to do, or even going to a financial institution, talk to a financial advisor, talk to a friend, just educate yourself a little bit more after you have an intention. If your intention is true, to truly invest for something or a rainy day, it'll always happen.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I want to ask you another question, just as a follow-up before I turn it over to Billie Jane and Paulina as well too. But what about this, right? Like, let's say I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, and I haven't started investing yet. One of my main concerns is, you always hear about these fluctuations in the stock market, and you hear about things like crypto and all that kind of stuff, and then it dips. My main concern is, number one, am I going to lose everything that I have, or worse, will I owe people money that I didn't owe money before?
So one thing I always tell clients is diversify. You can never have one investment. So for example, if you have $1,000 to spend, well, put it in a few things. that you believe in, that you're truly passionate about. Because a lot of people will say, well, you know what? Crypto just dropped 30% yesterday or the day before. Everyone's like, oh man, I saw it coming. Well, if you saw it coming, why didn't you remove your money from there then? The thing about it is, people don't have a crystal ball. No one does. Anyone that says they do, well, they're lying to you, because no one has that crystal ball. So if you properly invest from the get-go, you know exactly what your investment style is. If you're conservative, if you're an advanced, if you're moderate, if you're a very aggressive investor, and also you have to make sure you have a timeline for these things. If someone says, oh, I went down 30%, but my retirement plan is 65, well, yeah, it sucks. But at the same time, you're not retired for another 25 years, 35 years. So if it goes down 30% right now, it'll probably go back up over that time. Now, if you had a goal to buy a house or use your deposit money for that house in the next 6 months and you lost 30%, well, why did you put yourself in such an aggressive investment knowing that you only had 6 months to use that money?
Very wise words there. A lot to think about. One of the key things that I heard there as well too is, folks, you can do this by yourself, or you could also seek financial advice from someone who went to school, learned a little bit about the business, and is able to advise you. They won't be able to predict your future. Everyone, gets certain things off here or there, but it's really about advice. And it's really about taking, particularly when I hear you speaking to Bill, it's really about taking, what their goals are and putting them in a position to win, not necessarily going to be able to, for sure you're going to get this, right? So those guaranteed returns, I'm going to get 8%, absolutely stay away from things like that. Thank you so much. We are getting close to time, and I did want to pass some questions over to Paulina and Billie Jane, but just in the interest of time, one thing that I want to do just before we wrap up, because I want to turn it over to see if there's any questions in the chat as well. If anyone has questions for you all particularly, and I thank you for your time so much. The one thing I want to ask you, I'll start with you, Billie Jane. What do you want people to walk away from out of this session after the conversations that we had today? What do you think people should be left with? What's the last thing, if you can give them a quick elevator pitch?
That's a good one, because we did talk about so many different things. I guess one thing that I do want people to think about is the best time to start anything is now. Okay, so don't put off making a decision because you're concerned you don't know this kind of thing. I don't have enough. You can always start from where you are with an amount that is manageable for you, but you've got to start. Now, I understand too not knowing, right? And that's huge. That that can be so overwhelming and paralyzing. So forgive me. I would, times like that when you don't know, take advantage of experts. Don't be afraid to reach out for some help. There is a lot of information out there, and may be hard to kind of, sift through all of it to find out what really works for you. So leverage the expertise of other professionals, as Nabil mentioned, at a financial institution or a financial advisor. But remember, whoever you go to, seek that information. Don't turn your whole future over to somebody and suspend all opportunity to think about what's going on. Make sure that you are getting the education, because that is what they really should be doing first and foremost, educating you, guiding you in your journey, but ultimately you're taking ownership of that. So armed with the information, you can make the best decisions for yourself, but seek help. You don't need to struggle through this alone, but start.
Yes. Thank you so much. Paulina, I'll turn it to you. What's your quick elevator pitch for everyone on the line here?
Educate yourself. Read, talk to experts like YouTube. That's how I learned everything, honestly. Take courses, because the more educated you are, the better. And I say that whether you have a financial advisor or not. So I used to have a regular RSP, and through my own research and just understanding, I was like, oh, didn't realize how many fees were coming out of here. And so moved some stuff to my own direct investing, which I didn't even know you could do either, right? Mm-hmm. Saving myself on some of those fees. But education is key. I couldn't have done any of these things without doing the readings, without watching the videos, without talking to friends and advisors. And then the last thing I would say is what you're doing in terms of investing and how you're thinking, working with money, all of that, all depends with the people you have around you. So if you have people who are spenders, love debt, do not believe in life insurance, guess what? You're going to pick up that mindset. When I started my journey, it was me changing the folks who are around me, right? Because remember, I went from my dad, who was just like, yeah, debt, we all have debt, to like, no, don't do this. And then folks would teach me and train me and bring that up. So really look at your circle, and not to say cut your friends off, but find friends who are where you want to be financially, and like keep contact and talk, you know, with them. I have a friend who like, we would just talk about whatever. And now all of last year, all we talked about stocks, trading, bonds, like our conversation switched 100% as we got in that. And keep in mind what you're talking about with folks when you're talking money, right? And just be with folks who are okay with talking money. It's okay to talk money because we need it, right? And if you're not talking about it, it means you either don't know enough about it, or folks are hush hush, or, you know, it's just going to be detrimental. Our community should be talking about money, whether we're talking to kids, whether we're talking to artists, whether we're talking to, you know, my mother-in-law just the other day, I set her up with a WealthSimple account, just quick, right? All generations within our community, just keep folks who are positive around money, investing and all that kind of stuff around you, and watch your wealth grow, trust me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And Nabil, I want you to have, I guess, the final word here for the day. You know, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts in regards to what Paulina and Billie Jane were speaking to, correct?
And no, in general, like, what would you like to leave? So you can speak to that as well too, but what would you like to leave the audience with? Because for both of them, I hear very clear synergy, educate yourself, right? So there's no easy answer. So what would you say? What's your parting words for everyone on the line today?
A similar line to Paulina and Billie Jane is knowledge is power. You know, you need to have knowledge before you can do anything. You know, it's simple as, you know, as when you're a baby, your mom tells you got to take baby steps to move forward. And if you can't plant one foot before the other, you can't walk. Same thing with financial advice. You need to educate yourself. You need to go into an institution, a financial institution, speak to a financial advisor, and just basically say, hey, what can you do for me? What will you do for me? And by having that honest conversation, you know what you're going to get out from that person. If you decide to, you know, do it on your own, that's fine too. You know, just like Paulina said, she did it on YouTube. She learned it over the internet. And because of the pandemic, you couldn't go out, you couldn't do this. So you needed to educate yourself. And, you know, so just going back, accumulate as much knowledge about what you want to do and go forward with it. Just like Billie Jane mentioned, start now. Don't wait. Start now. So literally any person, or what I want people to get out of this quick panel discussion that we had about financial literacy is to be honest with yourself. If you truly want to invest, you will start learning and invest. If you say, well, you know what, I want to do it down the road, you're never going to do it. So have a clear intent and stick with it. Simple as that.
Amazing. I want to thank everyone who participated in the panel. I want to thank Nabil Rahim. I want to thank Paulina. I want to thank Billie Jane. Your expertise, the conversations that we had. I really do look forward to having many more. And I want to see what the future holds for all of us, and particularly the communities that we serve as well too. If there's anything that I want to leave to kind of end off this part of the presentation, is definitely like, you know, if there's anything that I wish for people is that, you know, they don't consider investing as if they're spending money. Like the money didn't go anywhere. It's still there. It's still going to be used. But, you know, you're using it towards a future goal later. So, you know, thinking like the way that we have conversations around money is like, I don't have enough to spend on that, or I don't have enough to put down for that. It's just really changing the mindset of, you know, investing in yourself, educating yourself, because there's no free meal. Everyone needs to learn a little bit about, you know, different things as well too. And that's it. But again, many thanks to you guys. If you want to stay for the remainder of the presentation, because we're going to actually talk about some of those investment vehicles that we hear all the time, have that conversation, please do stay. Chime in if you need to as well. And I want to take a look at the chat to see if anyone has any questions for our panelists right now.
Yes, there's a question in the chat. It says individuals can use TFSAs and RRSPs. What kind of accounts/strategies would you recommend for organizations?
That's good. So who would like to take that one of our panelists?
So we need a little further information regarding that. You know, what kind of organization? Is it a not-for-profit? Is it a corporation? You know, these are the things you need to ask, because there's different taxation for different type of companies. So I wish I could answer your question, Barb, but there's more information needed before I can answer it properly.
And Kevin, I'll just ask you to help me out with the chat because I can't see it on my screen properly. If there are more questions coming in,
yeah, no worries. I'm here to support you in that.
Thank you.
The Barb response was not-for-profits in the arts.
Okay, so a not-for-profit organization can do many things. So you're right. TFSAs, RSPs are usually for individuals, but you can open up a non-registered account, which is basically money outside of an RSP and tax-free savings account. By doing so, you can have it set up outside of the organization or within the organization, but it's very tricky because having a not-for-profit in the arts, the taxation from the CRA does not allow you to earn interest without being heavily taxed on that money. So there are a few avenues to do that outside of it, but it's a lot of, I wouldn't say it's a shell game, but there's a few other things, strategies that we can do. And it's not as simple as what type of accounts or strategies can we talk about, because there's more intricacies involved in that. You know, sorry about that, Barb. Unless Billie Jean and Paulina could maybe help out, but there's more information needed.
Yeah, I would say definitely more information needed on the, like, how to set up an investment strategy account. But I will say what you could do as a nonprofit charity, I believe, if you're charitable. I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but you can actually have donors who have investments can actually donate their investments to you instead of direct cash. And it's actually quite a little bit of a pull for donors, because normally, like, if, let's say I'm investing and I want to donate to your organization, I'd have to sell some of my shares or whatever, pay the tax on the gains. And then, so I'm losing my money off the tax I have to pay. And so then I can't give you as much. Whereas if you're able to set it up, I know that my organization does with Canada Helps, for example, I can do it so that I send this amount of shares in my portfolio to Canada Helps. They sell it, so I don't get the capital gains tax, and then they give it to our charity, and I get the tax receipt. So I didn't pay any tax, and I get the tax receipt for the full amount. And so that kind of entices donors to, you know, go that route a little bit, and you can start to speak to them about actually donating investments rather than straight out cash. Yeah, so that's one way, but I think you have to be a charity to receive that way. But you can look more. You can actually reach out to Canada Helps. They have a really great program and training on it as one way to do that.
And that was
I don't have much more to add to that, but that was great information.
Perfect. And Kevin, you're about to say that was the only question that we had?
Yes, that was the only question I see coming up in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So we'll give maybe a few seconds to everyone else. But if no one else has any other questions, okay. If anyone else has any other questions, please let us know. We can always send the questions off to the panelists later and provide you with a response a little bit later. I'd like to actually begin a conversation on some of those things that you were hearing about, on account types, and particularly about, the different investment vehicles, some of the risks particularly. I think when we have conversations around investments and finance and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that enough is talked about in terms of risks. And when I say risk, it's not to scare people off, but it's to give people an honest, authentic look and viewpoint on what some of the pain points might be. Nabil brought up an amazing point where you have to know your risk tolerance. You have to know what you're comfortable with and for how long you're going to be comfortable with for it. And so I want to bring up a PowerPoint here. Kevin, do I have access to share my screen? Am I an administrator?
Signed, sealed, delivered, done.
Oh, amazing. So I'm going to share my screen here with you all. I hope you all can see it. Let me just open this up. Can you all see my screen? I can't see you now, so maybe if one person can just say yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so we had the conversation, what does financial health mean to you? And again, thank you so much to our panelists for beginning that conversation. So now here's the question. All right, we got all that great information, but yeah, all right, Melrose, Sapamo, now what? What are you telling me? What can I really do with it? One of the great things I heard Paulina mention is, different accounts, right? So, you have different account types, but you can also have different companies that can help you invest your money by yourself. Again, like I said, everything that we provide you today is not going to be financial advice per se. I really, really, really strongly recommend that you speak to a financial advisor or someone who's knowledgeable in finance to be able to give you advice and make a proper recommendation to you. But moving on past that, Paulina mentioned a company called Wealthsimple. There are a lot of these companies out there. Major banks also have capabilities. If you do choose to do something on your own, try to invest yourself in stocks and bonds and stuff like that on your own. Wealthsimple has a trading platform. You can contact them. TD Bank does. BMO does. Most banks do. RBC, I think, does as well too. There's also another program out there called Modo. They started off as Mylo, and they're called Modo, where it's just you invest the spare change off of your debit card, right? So you go to a store and you pay $2.99 for a chocolate or $2.50 for a chocolate. They round up your purchase to the nearest dollar, and that 50 cents goes into what we call an ETF. And I'll explain to you guys what ETFs and all those kinds of things are. So in general, when we talk about investing, there are so many different products. We're really talking about things that at the basics of the core foundation. We talk about stocks and bonds. We talk about mutual funds and ETFs. Cryptocurrency is becoming a huge rage right now where people are putting their money down in cryptocurrency. And there's real estate and all these things also by pooling resources together are things that we really want to start to consider when we're talking about investing. So what you can invest money in is, again, stocks, bonds, and bonds is a category in and of itself. There's so many different layers to what bonds are. And you also have ETFs. And I'm actually going to talk to you briefly about stocks and bonds, not so much ETFs or cryptocurrency today, but stocks and bonds we'll just touch on really quickly because I realize now I have way too much content to present to you all. So when someone asks you what's a stock, I really want you to consider a stock is just a piece of a company or ownership in a company, right? The reason why a company would want to sell a piece of itself is, well, they want to drum up capital for a particular reason, right? Capital just means money. They want to get money for a particular reason. It could be for, future use. It could be, sometimes the principle is just, I'd rather not use my own money. Let's use somebody else's money. And so essentially the idea behind investing and behind stocks is you would put your money down with a company that you really believe in, right? So, if you have an affinity towards arts, maybe there's an arts company that's actually publicly traded on a stock exchange where you can actually buy stocks from. That's what publicly traded means. You can go somewhere, buy the stocks from this public platform, and then you'd actually own a piece of that company. So each piece of that company that's sold is called a share or a stock because you're sharing now in the profits because you are a part owner. And obviously the ownership levels range. You could be like 0.000001 to 12%, et cetera, et cetera. So the company gets money in exchange for the investor having partial ownership in their profits. And depending on the companies that you invest in, they can carry a various degree or varying degrees of risk. So that just in brief is stocks. I wish I'd be able to see you guys right now because I'd be able to ask you what questions do you have. So I apologize. This is different than I normally do presentations and stuff like that, but I appreciate you all bearing with me. So now, what's a bond? When I think of the term bond, I really want you guys to think of like a loan where you know exactly how much money you're going to you loaned out and how much money you're going to get back in return. So what you loan out is your principal, right? So if it's a loan of $1,000, you bought a $1,000 bond, you've loaned the bond out for $1,000, and then the interest is based on the interest rate at the time. So if it's 2% interest or whatever that could be, you know that your $1,000 plus 2% interest will be returned to you on a particular date, right? Now, a bond is another way that a company can drum up capital as well too. And in this case, instead of selling off a piece of themselves, because they don't want to be accountable to all these different people and having all these people have a say, if they want to do a different version, sometimes it's just short-term money that they need. Like I said, there's different types of bonds, like T-bills and stuff like that. Companies can issue bonds, and corporations can issue bonds. Governments can issue bonds. You have municipal bonds. You have federal bonds as well too. So that's essentially what a bond is. So a company could try to obtain a loan through a bank, which is just a regular commercial loan. Or if they don't want to go through that route, they could actually reach out to investors themselves and issue bonds. And bonds are actually held on a separate platform than stocks, but I'm not going to get into too much of that. But it always reminded me of, that old hip hop term, word is bond. I used to hear Mobb Deep say that all the time. And I don't know if I'm dating myself or turning people off because it's hip hop, but I love it. So honestly, when you think of bond, you almost think of something that's almost a guarantee. Like my word is so strong, it's almost a guarantee. So they are known as safer investments as stocks, but at the same time, you get what you pay for, right? With stocks, you're getting that higher investment or that higher return because there's more of a risk. With bonds, you don't get as much of a return, but that's also because your money's safer, right? So that's in general, the differences between stocks and bonds. There are many different things as well too, but as just a general first intro into it, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about stocks and bonds. So again, I really want to harp on this and I really want to make sure y'all really hear me here. When I talk to you about risks, it's not necessarily to scare you off from things, but I really want you to make informed decisions when it comes to investing, right? So, what will make you decide whether you want to purchase a bond as opposed to purchasing a stock, right? Stocks have things that come into play, right? Stocks have market risk, which means that, if the stock market is up, depending on how your stock performs, your stock can rise and fall. And we hear all these peaks and valleys. You hear terms like people are buying the dip, which means that they're buying when the stock is at its, when it's been a bit of a crash in hopes that they're buy low and then sell high a little bit later, right? So market and equity risk is how the fluctuation and the risk that you could lose your money, right? So, the risk that, you had $1,000, but now what you invested in isn't worth $1,000 anymore. And now you've lost a significant amount of your portfolio, right? Maybe not all of your money. It's not the Great Recession per se, but you've lost a certain amount of your portfolio. Credit risk talks about, like we all have to do, companies also have credit reports, right? So, looking at how frequently a company is good at paying people back, could go into bonds, in the conversation of bonds, but also it goes into the conversation of, how often or how frequently do they pay their dividends on time? Dividends are that kickback. If you own a piece of a company, right, you get dividends, that kickback, that interest that a company could pay you maybe quarterly or annually or whenever they pay whenever the company's doing well. Are their dividends late? Do they not pay dividends on time? These are some of the risks that sometimes can be associated with certain companies. So obviously the better the credit score for a company, the more secure that they are, and likely the higher stock price that would play into the price of the stock that you're going to buy as well too. There are things like currency risk, right? We all love to go across to the States and buy, you know, shoes and all kind of things. So currency risk is how strong is the dollar in Canada, let's say, for instance, compared to the dollar in the States. Oh, Canada's at 83 cents to the dollar in the States today. That's great. But if Canada drops to, you know, 69 cents per dollar, that means that the stocks in your portfolio that you paid Canadian cash with aren't going to be worth as much, particularly if you hold American companies as well too, right? So things like that comes into play. You have interest rate risk, which really affects the bonds, right? What happens when the interest rate drops and all that kind of stuff? All those things are affect the bonds. And then you have foreign investment risk, which is, you know, if you invest in a country overseas, maybe you invested in, you know, this really up and coming Venezuelan oil company, and all of a sudden, that's it. There's no more Venezuelan oil company because the government annexed it. That's a risk, right? So what's happening in the States politically can affect your investments as well too. And then just regular management risk. If you are, you know, if you don't necessarily know what you're doing and you sell stuff off at the wrong time, or you buy things that are a little bit too pricey when you could have bought them a little bit lower, or you have somebody else that is making decisions alongside with you or for you, providing you advice. If you have maybe a portfolio manager, everyone's human and everyone makes mistakes, and everyone can't see, like Nabil said, nobody has a crystal ball. But sometimes, you know, the decisions that we make, we sell things too quick, we hold on to things too long. Those are things that come into play with some of the risks. So those are just some of the risks that we talk about when we talk about, you know, investing your money and stuff like that. Ooh, there's another one here that I almost forgot: cybersecurity risk, which is one of the newest upcoming things. And you're hearing a lot of companies getting attacked. A lot of people getting attacked. I think this is mostly going to be right now. I would say it's going to be in the crypto space. But you know what? Nobody's immune to cybersecurity attacks. Anyone can get it. You know, companies like major companies like banks and all that kind of stuff fall victim to hackers. And I mean, these people are active. They try to hack into, you know, big banks and stuff like that consistently every day. So these are, you know, depending on who you're investing with and stuff like that, knowing, you know, feeling secure with who you put your money with is a big thing as well too. So cybersecurity risk, not only for organizations, but for yourself. Keep your passwords safe. Don't tell anybody of where you're necessarily putting all of your investments and all that kind of stuff. Keep all that stuff kind of secure and close to the chest for you. I'm going to, give me one sec. I think I see a couple of things. I think I see the chat is popping. So let me answer this question here: that is there a list of financial organizations that have diverse staff, ethical and inclusive? That's a really great question. I think that was Peter Zanette that asked that question. I think in the industry there is, if I can be honest, if I'm being honest, I don't know of any one company or corporation or place you can go that is 100% diverse. That would be a bit of a lie if I said that. But I do think that there are conversations, at least, that are happening to talk about diversity. I know TD, I've got friends who are in HR at TD that are particularly focused on hiring, you know, people of color, but particularly Black people in management and senior management positions, and hiring more Black staff and stuff like that. And I think that started a little bit before all of the stuff that happened last year. I know CIBC does a great job with the Indian community. I think I can't really tell of a lot of the other major banks and stuff like that, but even small fund companies. I work for some fund companies and stuff like that as well too. To be honest with you, it's not as much of a tapestry as we'd love to see in Canada. We'd love to be able to see a little bit more, and I think companies are really doing what they can to start the conversation. And I want to be honest with that. It's about starting the conversation about what the representation of their boards and the representation of their senior executives and management look like, and so that it's more representative of the people that they serve. Let me see here. I'm going to skip past this one because we don't have too much time. Apologies, everyone. So I'm actually just going to go to the end, and if you like what you see or if you like what you heard today, then I'm going to actually open up to the chat one more time to hear from you guys and see what works best for you all as well too. But having a conversation about how to invest, like Nabil, like Paulina, like Billy Jane said, the time is now. There really is no time to start. And as little as $25, even if it's $25 a month, whatever you could afford right now, that's where it starts. So open a direct trading account. And again, like I said, some that I know, TD Direct Investing, BMO Investor Line, but really, again, I encourage you to do your own due diligence. Paulina said something great, which she talked about fees. Look at how much it costs in order to invest in these companies as well too. Invest in the products that you want to invest in, because fees also eat away from some of your profits, right? And if you're okay with some fees, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. For people who don't know about investing like really well, a great option is, get a mutual fund account, right? Find a financial advisor. Mutual funds are a great way to invest for novice investors who aren't comfortable making the decisions themselves. They actually have a portfolio manager who's in control of the mutual fund, who diversifies the portfolio for you, who makes the decisions on when to sell and what to buy and all that kind of stuff. And someone with typically a very strong background in finance, with master's degrees and stuff like that, who've looked at like macroeconomics and stuff like that. Those are the people that are generally tapped to be portfolio managers. But if getting a portfolio manager and stuff like that isn't for you, and maybe not necessarily, you don't want to go the whole direct investing account, then, opening up a small account with a robo-advisor, like I said, Mylo or Mocha, is one where, Wealthsimple also has that functionality too, where you go tap your credit card or your debit card at the local store, and it withholds some money and puts it into an ETF, which is like a mutual fund, but cheaper. It holds some money for you and invests it there. And before I turn to the chat, I just want to talk about, how do you really protect yourself as well too? I know particularly, so almost every single province has a regulator, right? Ontario, for the banks, you have the ombudsman or the office of the superintendent. For advisors, you have what's called the MFDA. They regulate advisors to make sure they're not ripping people off. For mutual fund companies, you have a corporation called IROC and all that kind of stuff. And these are self-regulatory organizations that are devoted to protecting customers and clients and the health of the finance industry as well. In Quebec, you have something called the AMF, and they do, again, what's similar to Ontario. But like I said, there is, in every province, there is some kind of regulator, unless they're for the federal territories, like Northwest Territories and stuff like that, will fall under federal protection. So some things that you really want to watch out for is ignore promises of guaranteed high returns with little or no risk. You want to review the prospectus, which is a document that tells you how the person's going to manage the money, what goes into the fund, or how they're going to manage your money. All the details, the fees and all that kind of stuff are in the details. Fun facts, prospectuses, think about those things and read them, right? They could be dry reads sometimes, but it's really important that you know what's going on. And if you're looking at a financial advisor, then you could check the CSA website. All those organizations, those regulatory organizations, as I said, kind of came together to create the CSA. And the CSA will give you hints as to what advisors are in good standing or not in good standing. So you can do some research yourself. The Canadian Security Administrators, do some research yourself. If you find a financial advisor, take a look on that website, see if you can find some information on whether they're in good standing or not. And I think with that, I'm actually going to take a look at the chat really quickly as well too. Oh, so someone had mentioned that RBC InvestEase is also a robo-advisor. And yeah, that's it so far. So I did want to conclude the presentation or the slideshows as well too. We really believe in particularly supporting the arts community. We really believe in supporting you, not only as, not only your art, but your artists. so not only the art, but the artist behind the art as well too. So all the information that we provide, I really do hope that you take a look and use a personal lens and identify where you can, use some of the information where you can't. And also particularly what we'd like to know from you is this actually valuable for you? Like, how could Sapamo as an organization support you more in not only just like any financial endeavors that you have, but in anything that you're looking for? I'd like to know, number one, was this something that you'd like to see more of? Because I'd love to put these on for you more frequently if you want. Is it a different format that you'd like to see? Is there something that you need from Sapamo that we'd be able to provide for you or that we haven't been providing for you? So I'd like to open up the chat now to see if anyone has any questions or anyone has any concerns, comments, things like that.
There was a question earlier, and the question was around, as I go back up, is there a list of financial organizations that have diverse staff, ethical and inclusive frameworks?
Yeah, I think I answered that one. And again, I just have to be honest, from working in finance, from what I've seen, I'll be honest with you, I have not seen it yet. But again, the conversations are beginning. I will let you do what you want with that information. The conversations are there. But I will be honest, I think it's up to us individually as people who put their money, who invest their money with these organizations, these companies, because like it or not, as a customer at TD, you do have some kind of a say. You need to actually be able to, call for it, request it, demand it, or else it's just gonna, it's gonna be noise in the wind, and they won't really need to listen.
Yeah, there is an interesting point I'd like to also chime in here, which is this idea of, because we're IPOC persons and because families never spoke about money, when we become artists, we don't think about the money that we receive, the grants that we receive as actually turning around and making a profit for us. So I find there's an interesting space there around also, then if you have a 3-year project, what do you do with the money besides holding it in a bank account? Is there a way to allow it to generate support for your artistic practice? And it's interesting, when we also understand this idea of like working in not-for-profit organizations, how then do you actually make money to support the practice of creating and supporting artists? So I think there are many ways in which also the CRA and artists and arts organizations are actually working counterproductive to the understanding of what revenue generation is and what it might mean for the organization moving forward. Because the idea of even arriving at charitable status means that you have to go through a long process. So we realize that also there are many IPOC arts organizations who don't have charitable status because it takes a lot of resources in the organization to achieve it and to maintain it. We sometimes achieve it, but we fall out of it. Right. And that's all linked to this idea again for me, which is very interesting as an artist, but also someone working in program management around the system that's we're working in, understanding, as you were talking about, the things that is involved in the financial system, the organization, and then how as artists and or as artistic directors, arts workers, we actually work within that. What are the ways in which we actually find ways of survival? Because of course we're IPOC people, we've been surviving. Yeah. Right? What are some of the savvy things that we need to understand that you mentioned today that we can start to use to benefit the community? Education, they don't talk about it, right? We talk about training, we talk about coming out as an artist, but we don't talk about the financial rigor that's involved in that, right? And where does it start? It starts when you're now an artist in the field, and then you're going, oh my God, I'm not making the resources or the money to actually survive in this particular way. Now, what do I do? It's a sort of chicken and egg conversation as well in terms of when and how do we start to actually support the sector. I see
there's a question in the chat room.
A chat room question here.
Yeah.
How do foundations manage their money so they can continue to fund artists/charities? Are they different from what we've talked about before? Charities cannot get dividends from investments. I'd love to come to a session on this.
Okay. So that's something that we can definitely talk a little bit more about as well too in the future. We'll keep a couple of our panelists on tap currently as well too. I know Nabil is a financial advisor who'd be able to provide some information on this. Invite the Toronto Foundation for that one. Okay, sure. So we'll take a look at that. So make sure that you all, Kevin and Charles, are taking note of this. I did see one as well too, or the question was, what does a robo-advisor mean? A robo-advisor is just basically a simplistic algorithm that helps you invest your money yourself, right? So when we talked about things like Wealthsimple and all that kind of stuff, it's basically choosing a very simple, easy to manage strategy. So you'll answer a bunch of questions. They'll put your answers into an algorithm to kind of figure out your risk tolerance and stuff like that. And then a robot essentially will allocate money to those investments based on your selection. So it's kind of like having a financial advisor, but it's kind of like a machine. Again, do what you will with that. I think for myself, I'd like both, right? I think having a financial advisor who actually knows you, knows your family, knows what your goals are is invaluable. So I don't think you can take away from that. But I do also see the other side where it's like, people are worried about fees and stuff like that. And sometimes, you're worried about things that get costly. So having, a separate platform as a robo-advisor could be attractive to some people, particularly the younger generations. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if there's the right place to ask or mention this. When an organization has charitable status, does the organization have to be politically neutral or risk losing charitable status? I don't have the answer to that one. Kevin or anyone who's worked, maybe Paulina, if you're still on the line, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, charitable organizations are not supposed to be advocated. They can take up issues, but that's part of the issue of challenging or becoming part of a charitable organization.
I'll also add, I think there's a limited percentage of funding that could even go towards anything that is remotely political or advocacy piece. I think it's 10% or something. Can't go over that.
Okay.
COVID-19 has impacted the financial well-being of artists in the sector. When thinking of my own financial health, there are some things that concern me the most. I think at the start of the pandemic, a lot of organizations and art practices really pivoted to an online scene, which was really great. But as the pandemic has been drawn on and on and on, and I know we're all just, hoping for the light at the end of the tunnel in a way, we are having a burnout. We're having a burnout of both creatives and both audience members. And it's just, I've seen attendance go down and down and down. And with attendance going down, the funds also are going to go down and down and down. I've been lucky enough to see within the sector have been lucky enough to see some increase in grant money. However, speaking with some organizations, they're seeing a decrease in donations towards the art-based groups, just because, again, it's been very drawn out process with this pandemic, and arts in an online or socially distant space is just something that is very, very different. For myself, I did an entire almost placement residency grant program with Vibe Arts, in which I never got to meet anybody else in the program in person since last summer. My work is on exhibit downtown Toronto. I got to see it through a window. And so my main concern is that the money and the funding and the events are just going to continue to dwindle as we feel this burnout, and that for myself, I'm going to burn out. It's been, I can feel it. I can feel my energy dwindling, my creative energy. There's a sense of hopelessness around so many things right now in this pandemic. And it's just my will to create is also dwindling in a way, and it's a very, very dangerous thing. As we know, the arts has been so integral at all aspects in society at all times, but especially during a pandemic. And art is so healing, it's so connecting. So I think the burnout of attendance, audience, and creators is just a very dangerous thing, financially, emotionally, and society-wide.
Apologies for that. That was a little bit abrupt. Melrose, I want to offer you a space to say thank you to your panelists, your speakers.
There we go. Thank you so much. So yes, one more time, again, not only the panelists and the speakers, but I wanted to thank you, Kevin. I want to thank Charles, Victoria, everyone who had a hand in putting the gathering together. It's an incredible work. I want to thank the panelists as well. Two of them jumped in at the last moment for us, and I couldn't thank them enough. If they're still here, Paulina and Billie Jane, thank you so much for your expertise and contributing to the conversation. Thank you for your leadership and everything else in the middle that I can't think of right now. I want to thank Nabil Rahim for also bringing his expertise and his leadership as well too. I look forward to working with all those folks and more on future panels. And thank you to everyone who put questions in the chat, but everyone who also lent support, who was thankful and appreciative of this. So everyone who's at the gathering today as well too, thank you so much for your support and your time. And with that, I will say adieu. I do have to run to another meeting.
Before you go, Melrose, thank you for working with us in this way and bringing this panel together, moderating. Excellent job.
Thank you guys so much. Take care.